Hey everybody, how's it going? It is Joe, and welcome back to another episode of Inside Our Phillies. The Phillies are coming off of a 2-1 series win over the Miami Marlins in Philadelphia this week. On Tuesday night, they lost 6-5 in extra innings, 11 innings against the Marlins. On Wednesday, they set a franchise record for home runs in a game in which they won 11-1. And then today, 1-0 shutout of the Marlins to win the series 2-1. So here to talk about it, we have just me. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter and sweeter episode. This series does not mean much, just like the Twin series doesn't mean much coming up. So I know that people are more focused on the playoffs right now, and I want to try to keep the amount of time that we're spending talking about these more meaningless games to be a little bit more reasonable. But nonetheless, let's kind of get into each of these games, starting with that loss that the Phillies took on Tuesday night. This was the game that Chris Sanchez started. He looked quite good. 7 innings, no earned runs, 6 strikeouts, 91 pitches. Typical Chris Sanchez, but we saw David Robertson come in and struggle a little bit. Duran got hit a little bit once again. Kerkering, another bad inning. So this was kind of a game that was all over the place. I don't know how frustrated you can really get at this game. The guys that pitched are guys that we are going to be relying on in the postseason. Robertson has to be better. Duran has to be better. Kerkering has to be better. Trevino, whatever, he allowed some runs in extra innings, but I'm not going to get upset about that. But I think what this game really illustrated to me is that the right-handed pitching on this team is kind of a big struggle point. When you really think about it, the 3 pitchers that the Phillies are likely to be pitching in the division series, in Ranger Suarez, Chris Sanchez, and Jesus Luzardo, are all lefties. And a lot of the guys that we trust the most out of the bullpen, with the exception of Duran, who I think everybody still trusts, they're lefties as well. Banks, Strom, etc. So when you need to get outs in late in games, when you need somebody to come in out of the bullpen, who are you going to from the right side? Because Duran, probably not going to be pitching in the 7th inning in the postseason. Do you trust Kerkering? I think that's questionable. Do you trust Robertson? I think that you can make an argument, and I think I still trust Robertson more than I don't, even though he's kind of shown himself as being someone that can't pitch in back-to-back days. With all the extra off days in the postseason, I think that's a lot less relevant. So I'm not as concerned about that. And Aaron Nola coming out of the bullpen, or Walker Buehler, these aren't guys with the kind of the lockdown stuff that you want to be throwing, in the 7th or 8th inning of the game. So I'm not really sure how much I see that as an option. We're gonna have to see what happens. There's not much regular season left to see how the Phillies are going to handle things. I do rapidly expect Rob Thomson to change the way he manages games in the postseason. A lot of the things that we have not seen in the regular season, I think we're going to see in the postseason. Duran has, been a multi-inning guy at times in his career with Minnesota. With the Phillies, he has never done that, even though he probably could. But I expect him to be kind of thrown into those situations in the postseason. I'm very curious to see what Rob Thomson is going to do with the length of starting pitchers. I feel like aside from Chris Sanchez, there's a chance that Rob Thomson doesn't allow anybody to go deep into games. But I would argue that with the state of the bullpen being so-so, it might be wise to let Jesus Luzardo, when he's having a good night, to go as deep as he can, at least being reasonable. So that's going to be interesting to see, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that shakes out. I'm really not going to take anything bad away from this series, or anything bad away from the Minnesota series. But I do think we need to be ready for the possibility of having some troubles with right-handed pitching in the postseason. I don't think that would have surprised anybody going into this series, and I don't think this series would have made anybody feel better. One thing that I did think was pretty interesting about this game was the whole Real Muto situation. For those that don't remember, JT got hit by a foul ball in the hand. People were worried that he broke something. He finished the inning catching and then was removed for the next inning when it was time for him to come to the plate. This was frustrating to me. I made a comment on Reddit that a lot of people got mad about, saying that the Phillies deserve what's coming if he did break something. And I stand by that. Obviously, you can't predict when somebody is going to get hurt, and something as fluky as just getting hit in the hand. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get mad at Jade Realmuto catching at that exact moment. But I do think there's still room to criticize the general strategy that the Phillies have employed with JT Realmuto. At this point, he's played 132 games this season, which is a lot for a catcher. It's pretty much the way he's always been. 134 games in 21, 139 in 22, 135 in 23. He was hurt last year, so he only was 99 games last year. But despite being an aging catcher that's now 34 years old, JT Realmuto continues to play more than just about any other catcher in the league. And I think that's fine, right? Like, he clearly can handle it, and that's great. But at the same time, here's a guy that I want to get rest. If you want to keep him in the lineup, maybe he's a guy that really likes being in the lineup a lot, so his swing can kind of stay on the same pattern, stay with his timing. DH him. That's fine. Like, these games don't actually matter, and I don't need JT Realmuto's knees taking the stress, just days before the Phillies are going to be heading into the postseason. We still haven't had a single game in which Garrett Stubbs has gotten a plate appearance. What I would have probably done going into these two series against Miami and Minnesota, give Realmuto a game behind the plate, give Marchand a game behind the plate, give Stubbs a game behind the plate in each series. I think that would have been great. JT Realmuto could have DH'd as much as he wanted to in days that he didn't catch. But obviously the Phillies chose to not go down that path, for better or for worse, and he was back in the lineup today. So that's something that I was a little bit concerned to see. One other thing early on in the series that I kind of want to point out is we're kind of seeing, and later in the series, we're kind of seeing the flu start to ravage its way through the Phillies. We've had, reports of guys getting sick on and off here for like the last couple weeks. I remember Marsh was sick not long ago. But it seems like it's kind of spreading around the team a little bit more. Not great timing. Bryce Harper missed the first two games because of an illness, and he described it as being maybe the most sick he's ever been. And then in today's game, Max Kepler was taken out because he wasn't feeling well. Nick Castellanos came in as a defensive replacement, however ironic that is. So it's something to monitor. I don't know if we need to keep everybody 6 feet apart in the dugout. We need to get them their flu shots. Whatever you got to do. I don't want this to be something where, like Mookie Betts, who got sick before the season and then lost a bunch of weight and then really struggled until you got into September. Like, I need these guys to be coming into the postseason strong. And in about a week, the Phillies are going to be playing postseason games. So that's really what I care about, and something that I kind of have a little bit of alarm bells going on, because I don't want this to be a season that we look back at being ruined by an illness. That would be a shame. Anyways, let's go to a more positive note, and that's just the absolute joy that was Wednesday night at Citizens Bank Park. The Phillies, 8 home runs. 8 home runs! Set a record for the most amount of home runs that they've ever hit in a single game. Edmundo Sosa led the way with 3 in his first game back from the injured list. Absolutely incredible. Kyle Schwarber hit 2 more in a game that he was 4 for 5. Kind of nuts. Bohm hit a home run. Otto Kemp hit a home run. The Ottoman Kempire back at it again. Bryson Stott, longest home run of his career, 440, 441. Just crazy stuff. I feel like, sometimes you see pitchers that are left out there to die. And Sente Beloso, he was left out there to die. It was at 4 home runs in 13 pitches. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like that before, and I may not see anything like that again. But this was a really, really reassuring start by Jesus Luzardo. I had seen after the game that this apparently is like the first time since he kind of got blown up in those like back-to-back starts and had that really bad month towards the middle of the season that his ERA is below 4 at the end of a start. which is great to see, right? That'll be his final start of the regular season. He'll have, an ERA that's in the threes on his baseball reference page forever in 2025. And I'm sure that kind of stuff matters to him. And it's good to see. 103 pitches out of him. He has set a career high for innings pitched this year, which I don't think anybody would have expected going into the season. Tim Mesa, Max Lazar, look pretty good in relief. That's, pretty much what you've got to see. But this was a frustrating Castellanos game, which is disappointing after what happened on Tuesday, where Nick Castellanos had a huge hit off the bench. Castellanos was brutal, absolutely brutal on Wednesday night. I think it was one of his worst games of the season. Strikeout looking, fly out to right, strikeout swinging, safe because of a throwing error. And I mean, there were 4 errors in that game on Wednesday. Kind of crazy. And then that double play in the 8th that, took away any chance of Edmundo Sosa being able to have a chance at hitting 4 home runs, which, you can't overreact to one game. I was starting to buy in a little bit to Nick Castellanos being able to be a more productive hitter. I still think that under, any circumstance, the Phillies need to get him out late in games for his defense, which we all know is not great. And I think that's something that the Phillies are going to have to take very seriously in the postseason. But his hitting needs to kind of be more consistent. But we're kind of out of time. And with only 3 games left, I can't imagine the Phillies are going to be rapidly changing the way that they view things, and just kind of start him every game in the postseason. I get the argument that if anybody is going to go hot, go torrid in the postseason, Castellanos probably gives you a better chance than a lot of guys on this team. Him at his best is better than Otto Kemp. It's better than Weston Wilson. It's better than Max Kepler. But I think the downside, the, first percentile to 50th percentile outcome for Nick Castellanos is a black hole in the middle of your lineup. And that's something that the Phillies probably should avoid at all cost. One other thing that I thought was pretty interesting is that, there's probably a roster battle going on right now that hasn't been talked about very much. And that's who is going to kind of get the spot of being the right-handed hitter off of the bench that's not Nick Castellanos, right? Between Weston Wilson and between Otto Kemp. But Weston Wilson has not looked great recently. He's probably a better defender than Otto Kemp, has some more, positional flexibility than Otto Kemp. But Otto Kemp has just been a much better hitter recently. Weston Wilson at the Mendoza line. Otto Kemp been pretty good. Hit for some more power recently. I would rather have Edmundo, or I would rather have Otto Kemp in my, bench than Weston Wilson. Hopefully, it doesn't end up mattering all that much, but it is how I feel. And I'm curious what everybody else feels about that. It's, I think, an interesting, under-talked about thing that's going on within the team. So now let's go to the game today. A game that was plagued by a very strange weather delay situation. There was, the one time where they put the tarp on and then immediately took it off, and then we had an actual rain delay of about an hour. Weird game. Walker Buehler, he went 5 scoreless, only 2 strikeouts and 3 walks, but 5 scoreless nonetheless. And then he did something that I don't know if I've ever seen before, where he pitched in the bullpen after the start. He wasn't happy with the amount of work that he got in those 5 innings, only 74 pitches. And he wanted to keep throwing. So as Taijuan Walker was out there in the 6th inning, Walker Buehler was in the bullpen, which kind of cool to see. I kind of love it. Walker Buehler is somebody that I've really started to like, and just, the limited amount of time that he's been on the team. And Taijuan Walker came out of the bullpen, Strom, Robertson. They did their job. We had a shutout, and you love to see it, right? I think that this was pretty much exactly what you want to see. Bryce Harper looked a little bit off with his timing, a little bit concerned about that. Bohm has had a really kind of sneaky good series. Stott has continued to stay hot. Offense only scored 1 run, but whatever. I think that this is a win overall, and something that you have to feel good about. So this series, I don't think you can overreact to anything. But the Phillies did their job. and they officially did clinch a bye from that win that they had on Tuesday night. Not that it was really in much question, really ever since the second game of that series out in Los Angeles. But now there is zero doubt the Phillies have clinched the bye, and they are going to be not playing in the wild card round, which is great. Last year, it was so much fun to watch those wild card games with absolutely no stress about an upcoming Phillies game or being upset about how a Phillies game went the night before. Just be able to enjoy some really intense, good baseball. I really liked that last year, and I'm glad and looking forward to being able to do the same thing this year. Clear your calendars, everybody. The wild card series are almost here. Though it's a shame that those are Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I'm sure many people are going to be sitting at their desks and doing the best they can to stay up to date on what's going on with these games. So let's get into a couple listener questions that we got. I don't want to get too far into this without that. The first one that we got was Coaster Craze, who was asking why Thompson brought Duran in on Tuesday, and it seems weird to put Banks in for only a third of an inning. To tell you the truth, it seems to me like the bullpen just doesn't make any sense right now. Like they're kind of just doing whatever they feel like doing. I guess he brings Duran in because he had the chance to close the game, right? And if he closed the game and he didn't allow that run, and it never goes to extra innings, and the Phillies get the win, and they sweep the series. Nobody's questioning Rob Thompson's decision-making at all. But I think for a lot of these high-leverage guys, the Stroms of the world, the Durans of the world, they're trying to kind of limit their innings and kind of make sure that they are fresh going into the postseason. I'm sure that they're still throwing on the side, but obviously it's higher intensity when you're pitching in a game, even if the game doesn't mean all that much. And I kind of think that's how I would explain it. I think that the way that Rob Thompson is going to be managing games in the postseason is incredibly different than right now. Just looking at who pitched in this series, right? On Tuesday, you had Ryan Kerkering and Lou Trevino throw innings. I definitely don't think Trevino is going to be getting any impactful innings in the postseason. And at this point, I'd be surprised if Kerkering did. So now the game Wednesday, you had Max Lazar and Tim Meza each thrown in. Guess what? They're probably not going to be throwing any impactful innings at all when you come to October baseball. And then today you had Walker Buehler, Taijuan Walker. They threw 7 innings, and those guys aren't going to be throwing really in the postseason. Though it is probably likely at this point that Walker Buehler makes the roster, which is cool to see. Taijuan Walker has had a decent year, ERA of 4.11. Got up there a little bit towards the end, but I respect the job that he's done. But I think I would rather have Walker Buehler on the playoff roster than him. And to tell you the truth, I would trust Walker Buehler in a start more than I trust Aaron Nola, just because I think that even though a good Nola start is better than a good Buehler start, a bad Nola start loses you a game in October. A bad Buehler start isn't as bad as a bad Nola start, and you have a better chance to fight back. That's how I feel about it personally. So it's a good question by Coaster Craze, but I don't think you can take away too much from how Rob Thompson is managing these games, because he's going to be managing them completely differently in October, and truthfully, probably about like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago even, these also would have been managed completely differently. But thank you for your question. Next thing we got, this was more of a comment from Blandzilla, which I completely agree with. But it's pretty wild to hit 8 bombs in yesterday's game and then win a 1-0 shutout from our 2 worst starters, not named Aaron Nola, and arguably our best reliever, and a guy getting his legs back. Which, it's baseball for you. And my response to Blend was exactly that. Baseball, you gotta love it. And he said back, and I do. It's so special to me still how baseball is kind of, such a strange sport. It's so much less orchestrated than other sports. There's not really set plays. Unlike every other sport, the defense is the team that really has control over what's going on, right? How the pitcher acts and what the pitcher throws is going to be what determines how runs are scored, not what the offense does, which I think is just like unbelievably interesting. And speaking of kind of like the fabric of baseball, it was announced that the ABS system is going to be coming into the league next year. Spring training games, regular season games, postseason games, all games, we're going to have the ABS challenge system, similar to what we saw in spring training in the All-Star game this year. So essentially how this works is immediately after a pitch, like pretty much right after a pitch is thrown, either or after a pitch is called, the pitcher, the hitter, or the catcher can kind of tap their head, say that they want a pitch to be reviewed to see if the umpire was wrong, if it was a ball or a strike. The strike zone that the league has, the ABS zone, which notably is very different from the zone that you see on TV. The zone on TV is just straight up not accurate, which is part of why I despise it so much. That'll get checked automatically, and if the player that called the challenge is correct, they will not lose the challenge. So essentially, each team will get 2 wrong challenges over the course of a game, and extra ones in extra innings if a game goes to extra innings. And I know people are split on how they feel about ABS. There's a lot of people that love the human element of baseball, which I agree, right? Like I'm kind of a guy that is more traditional in terms of how I think that the rules should be. I'm pretty, statistically inclined, and I like the way that statistics are used in baseball. But I'm a guy that hates the DH. I'm never going to like the DH. I'm not a big fan of the zombie runner that you get on second base in extra innings during the regular season. But ABS is something that doesn't bother me as much. I don't want to say I love it, because I don't. But I think that this is a good middle ground in between the people who think that ABS should just be a thing and there should be absolutely no calls that the home plate umpire is making, and the people that say the human element of the game is vital to the game being what it is. I think that the disruptions caused by this ABS challenge system, based on what we saw in spring training and the All-Star game, is going to be significantly less than what we have with the challenge system on, if runners are safe or out, or balls fair foul, any of that kind of stuff, right? These are longer reviews, including the one tonight where it can take, a couple of minutes to get a call compared to just a couple seconds for every single ABS call. It's going to flow really well with the game, and I think that that's going to be a welcome improvement. I think it brings some strategy back to the game in terms of when are you going to call your challenges? Are there going to be certain hitters that you say just don't call a challenge, right? Like I save it for somebody else. Because for the Phillies, for example, would we want Weston Wilson using a challenge if we have Bryce Harper in the 9th inning and he can't use a challenge? Like that would upset a lot of people if we had that situation. And I think it's going to open up a lot of strategy that I think the game is missing ever since the DH got taken away from the National League, which I still am very upset about. So it's going to be interesting to see what that does. Couple other things to bring up here. Kyle Schwarber with his 2 home runs. He's now 2 away from tying Ryan Howard for the all-time Phillies record in home runs. You never know what can happen, right? It's a not great team coming in Minnesota, and we'll get to their projected starters quickly here. But it would not surprise anybody if Kyle Schwarber hit 2 or 3 home runs to tie or break Ryan Howard's record. Which, is kind of something that it would be a little bittersweet. I haven't fully processed it yet just because, there's a good chance that it doesn't happen. But Ryan Howard growing up, for anybody that's like me, I'm 25 years old. He's the guy that you remember as just being a prolific power hitter. And he was one of the more prolific power hitters for a few years there, before he fell off after tearing his Achilles. But it would feel a little bit like part of my childhood would die if Kyle Schwarber took over Ryan Howard's record. At the same time, there's a lot of younger baseball fans that Kyle Schwarber is their Ryan Howard, and it's special to kind of see baseball grow like that. And truthfully, one of my favorite parts of this Phillies run has been seeing the kids get into baseball again. It's a special sport. I know that. You know that. We all know that. And baseball is in a much healthier place than it was a few years ago across the country, but I think especially here in Philadelphia. Big part because of the fanatic, of course, but also because of this team that's out there every single day. And I think it's important to kind of step back sometimes and not take for granted how great, this opportunity is, for however frustrating this team can be, however much I want it to get shaken up, which, I do. At the end of the day, I love the Phillies, and I so deeply, badly want them to win a World Series. That would be so great. But anyways, let's get into the probable pitchers for the last series of the regular season against the Minnesota Twins. Which, an interesting way to end the season. But anyways, Friday, we have Joe Ryan going against Aaron Nola. On Saturday, Mick Abel makes his return to Philadelphia, going against Ranger Suarez. Mick Abel, who has been quite bad for Minnesota. He kind of was in the minors, then got up to the majors, and then he was really bad, so he went back down to the minors. Now he's back up in the majors once again. I'm sure the Minnesota pitching development is going great for him. I feel bad. And then on Sunday, Simeon Woods Richardson going against Chris Sanchez. So should be an interesting series. Not that I think people care all that much about it, to tell you the truth. But we'll see what happens nonetheless. So going ahead and kind of talking about the potential postseason matchups for the Phillies, now that the 2 seed is clinched. The Dodgers are set in the 3 seed now that they have officially clinched the NL West. But that 6 seed that the Dodgers are going to be playing in Los Angeles in the wild card series, that is not set. It is looking more likely than not that it is going to be the New York Mets, and what a series that'll be. Mets and Dodgers in LA next week in the wild card series. But it's not settled yet. The Marlins now are officially eliminated from the playoffs because of them losing 2 out of 3 in this series. The Reds remain 1 game back of the Mets, and they hold the tiebreaker. And the Diamondbacks are 2 games back. They also have the tiebreaker over the Mets. But the Mets are going into a series against the Marlins in Miami. Maybe the Marlins curse is now affecting them. How funny would that be? The Diamondbacks are going to play 3 games in San Diego, in a series that doesn't matter all that much for San Diego. And the Reds are going to play 3 games in Milwaukee in a series of games that doesn't really matter all that much to Milwaukee. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how this all shakes out. The Phillies, for what it's worth, completely meaningless games right now. The Phillies have clinched the 2 seed. Well, technically, if the Phillies swept and the Reds swept the Brewers, the Phillies would get the number 1 seed. But that's unlikely to happen. But the Phillies have clinched, today that they will have a better record than anybody in the American League. So if they do make the World Series, they will have home field advantage at that time, which is always good to see. Though I kind of do miss the All-Star games determining the World Series. It was so stupid, but I missed it nonetheless. Anyways, that is everything that I had for this episode today. If anybody has any questions as we kind of get into this postseason run, send them in the podcast channel of our Discord server, and we'll be sure to get to your questions in the next episode. Always love the interaction that we get with everybody. I think it really helps to make the show better, and it is a good way to get involved. We're still working out our playoff plans for the podcast. I am a little apprehensive to commit to more than I can do, especially since I try to travel as much as I can for the postseason, and would almost certainly at least be at any NLCS or World Series potential clinchers if they were on the road. And if the Phillies are in LA, I'm going to have a really hard time convincing myself to not go to LA. So it can be a little bit hard to record amidst all of that. But here's what I'm thinking right now. On Sunday night, I want to record a short little post-Twin series thing, kind of similar to this, just kind of talking about those 3 games. And then I want to have on Monday an MLB postseason preview that really doesn't have any kind of unique focus on the Phillies, kind of just making a bracket for the postseason, talking about the big stories, what we think is going to happen. And then I want to do a Phillies NLDS preview on Thursday night or Friday. Obviously at that point we'll know who the Phillies are going to play in the NLDS, with hopefully game by game reactions after each game of the NLDS, and hopefully deep into the postseason run here in Red October. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to kind of learning more about how this is going to go with you. For better or worse, this is probably going to be the last run of this iteration of the Phillies. There are going to be changes in the offseason with the upcoming free agents. So I'm going to do my best to enjoy this last run. I know I've been at times critical of this core, but this has been the third most successful era in Phillies history, and I think it's important to remember that. So I'm going to do my best to do that, as it's almost done. There's going to be differences next year, and it's going to be weird. But thank you all for listening to this. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you all real soon. Like I said, Sunday night for sure. We'll have like a post series reaction podcast to the Twins, and then we'll go from there. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later.